Okay, so you guys, we're going to be talking about church words. Words that Christians use, that maybe someone who is not a Christian or someone who has not grown up in a church would have no idea what it is. I would just like to highlight Noelle as the only female in the second row. Okay, so we are going to do, I'm going to show you a picture of that. When you look at the picture, you're going to try and guess what church word that picture represents. You ready? Okay, so first one. What do you think that church word that picture represents? Call. Way to go. Oh yes, we have whatchamacallit bars. You guys know what these are? These were huge when I was in high school. And whatchamacallit is a word that someone uses when they don't know what the word is. So if you guess what church word the picture is showing, you get a whatchamacallit word. Because that word, to someone who doesn't know what it means, is basically whatchamacallit. Okay? So call. Yep. So Brandon's good for that. Okay. So this word, if you're gonna say, oh, I feel called, or I have a calling from God, if you did not grow up in the church, how do you know what that means? What does that sound like? Like God called you? He has your phone number? What do you mean God called? So that can be a confusing word. We have a Bible verse where it talks about the word called is used. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So the word is in the Bible, the word called, in the context in which it's used in Romans. It's saying that God has a plan, wants a relationship with each person. He has called us. But you can see how that could be a confusing word if you didn't grow up in church and you know. Okay, so the next one. What do you think this is? Close. Who is this person? Yes, witness. You ever heard the word witness? Let's go witness. Let's go witness. What does that mean to you? Like as a Christian, in what context have you used that word? Go talk to people about Jesus. Now if you, like here the Bible says it, there's a verse in the Bible that says you will be his witness to all people of what you have seen and heard. That's like the Apostle Paul is talking to people who actually witnessed Jesus. But if you are talking to a person who's not a Christian, a person who doesn't know the church lingo, and you say, hey, I can't hang out with you on Friday night because I'm going to go downtown and witness, they probably would think about like a courtroom. Like you're going to go to court? Like what is that mean? So it is in the Bible, but it's not a word that someone who doesn't know the Bible would understand. Who got that? Or you hand out the fire. Okay. What's the next one? This one's tough. Fortnite is not a church word. But there is a church word represented in the picture. What do you think it is? Camping? No, camping is not. That's a good guess though. Is that a church word, camping? I feel like other people would know what that word is. Who said that? Yes. Warfare.
Would you like to designate someone to get your pin for?
Yeah.
So warfare. Warfare is a church word. Like we're using that word, oh, I'm experiencing warfare, spiritual warfare. It is in the Bible. You know, it says, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. That is like referring to or explaining what spiritual warfare is. But if you were to say to your buddy, hey, Like I gotta go to the prayer night because I've had a lot of warfare in my life. What are they thinking? Like, did you enlist? What's going on? Right? Another one that's just like doesn't make sense unless you have the context of church words. Okay, then I got one more. What do you think?
Reality. Experience.
Who said it?
What was it? I said experience.
It was definitely Sam.
Vision. Isn't that what those things are?
I thought it was
Virtual reality? That is not a church word. What is going on, Fletcher? Come on.
Pretty sure Jesus said it. Like more.
Virtual reality. In the name of my name. Virtual. No, vision, okay? Like you heard this church word? I've used this church word. God gave me a vision. Like what does that mean? Like a whatever those things are called? What are those things called?
Virtual reality pro.
Pro? Whatever. The idea that God would give a vision is kind of a tough thing to understand, especially if you don't have a context of God. The Bible does talk about vision. God spoke to Paul in a vision. Those are the things that God said to him. That spoke to him when he's in prison. I mean, so it's a legit word. It's a thing that happens. But if you are not a part of the church world, which, I mean, there's lots of people that aren't, then they hear, like, you had a vision, what do you think they're thinking? Are you taking drugs? What is happening here? It could be a little confusing. So good job. Those are our whatchamacallit words to start our talk.
Okay, so I have a very uncommon thing about me. I enjoy numbers in business. If you don't, that's okay. You don't have to like it for this example, but my dad likes to fish a lot, and I actually do marketing for his fishing guide company called Metro Muskies. And as I was just thinking about, church words and like, what does it mean when somebody says a church word? What does it mean when somebody hears a church word and doesn't know what it means? This was a really good example that I came across. I run ads for my dad's business, and so whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, I'll like get a picture of him with a huge fish and then put his logo on it and then say like, order trip now. And so the main place that I do is Facebook because that's just the best place to advertise for products that you're selling unless it's like teenagers. And this is an ad that I ran. These are numbers from an ad that I ran that I put absolutely no form of targeting on. You can target ads toward age groups, you can target them towards gender, you can target them towards interests because somehow Facebook knows your interests. I don't know. But this ad I ran for 6 days and it got 77 people that clicked on it. It reached 9,300 people, which means they saw it. And there were 12.8 clicks per day, and there was a 0.83% CTR. That means click-through rate. Of the people that saw it, what percentage of them clicked on the ad? And so these are the numbers that was for an ad that had no targeting. I wasn't trying to reach anybody. I wasn't looking for any sort of target market. And these are the numbers for when I actually thought about who I was trying to talk to. And I'll put them next to each other so you can see it. 264 people clicked on it from a pool of 3,300 less people. 44 clicks per day, and about 5 to 6 times more people that saw it actually clicked on it. You don't have to understand what any of that marketing lingo means, but the most important thing to take away from this is that when I was more focused on what the audience would understand and less focused on all of the things that I wanted to say, I actually reached less people, but more of them were interested in what I had to say. And I think that's a great lesson, is that it's not all about quantity. It's not all about the number of people that you talk to. Sometimes it's about the words that you say to the people that you do talk to. And using church words isn't wrong, but how much more effective can you be when you think about the words that you say and how they're going to be received by your audience? It can provide a lot of richer and deeper conversations and relationships, and it can provide future opportunities for God to open up a space for you to be able to share about Him with that person. I'm going to go over a verse that talks about salt from Colossians 4, 5 through 6. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Okay, so salt was very, very valuable back when this was written. Like, it's still valuable today, because it's literally on every table everywhere. But it's not like something we use for currency, which they would do back then. But they talked about salt. Paul talked about it here for 3 reasons. The first reason is that it was a preservative, and it still is. The second reason is because it can add flavor to something. And he also made a note on it because of how precise you have to be with salt. And so when you think about conversations you have with non-believers, you don't have to say certain church words to be able to discuss God or to be able to have God work in a conversation with somebody else. The important thing that Paul was trying to get at is that as long as you preserve the message of Christ, just like salt preserves, through your conversation with that person, which means that you're honoring God through what you're saying and you're choosing to do 2 of the most important things that we're supposed to do in the Bible, love God and love people. As long as you do that, you're doing your good job as a disciple. As long as that person can tell by how you love that you are a disciple of Jesus, that they can tell that you have a different flavor, as weird as that sounds, because you've given your life to Christ, then you are doing your job as a disciple, and God is going to work through that conversation. And it also requires, just like salt does, to be wise about how much to add, where you add it, and when you add it. So if you're able to sprinkle parts of the gospel in that conversation, like, hey, I'm going to church tonight. And then instead of talking for 10 minutes about all that you're going to do at church that night, ask the person, have you ever been to church before? Why or why not? And that can yield so much greater results than if we just are talking with using all of the words that only we know. But overall, from that verse, we learn that love is the true message of Christ. And if you can love somebody through conversation, you are preserving the message of Christ and communicating how he has renewed who you are. And Paul says here to be wise, to make the most, to have grace, to be ready to answer everyone, which just means to be thoughtful with the words that you use. And think about what words the other person's actually going to understand when you say them.
Awesome. I love that. I can think of a lot of people that I've known in my life that I wish they would have maybe thought about what they were saying before they said it. So we are going to give you guys an opportunity to take a look at some church words and see if you can describe what these church words mean if you were having a conversation with someone that wasn't a Christian, someone that didn't have the context of church words. Generally speaking, if you can't describe a word in 3 sentences or less, it's not a description that will be understood. So less is more when it comes to being able to describe something. These are 3 words: worship, mission trip, and Pentecost, that I have heard in the high school ministry here at Woodridge multiple times in this last school semester. So, if I am not a Christian and I come to high school ministry and I hear the word worship, I hear the word mission trip, I hear the word Pentecost, I go, what are you talking about? So, this is your opportunity as a group. This side of the room will be one group. This side of the group will be another group. And you guys do whatever you need to do to your bodies to be able to have a conversation with each other about these 3 words and describing what they mean to someone that doesn't understand. Great, let's do it. Here's a brief story of a time when this happened to me. I went to high school, believe it or not, and graduated. Yep. And after high school, I did a gap year. And I did this gap year with an organization called YWAM, which stands for Youth with a Mission. Yep, you know all about it. And I grew up in a Lutheran church where all the pastors wore robes. And you went to church, but it wasn't because you wanted to. It was just because that's what we did as a family. And what happened at church did not influence really the rest of my life, or the rest of my life. But this crazy story happened, and I ended up doing this gap year with an organization called Youth with a Mission, which I'll throw out a church word, is a very charismatic organization. By charismatic, I mean all kinds of things happen when you are with YWAM. Things that I had never experienced before. Things like people praying in tongues, which is what happened at Pentecost. People were speaking different languages, but apparently, at the time I did not know it, but there were people that had a special prayer language that God gave them and they could pray in tongues. Okay? People were slain in the spirit. This was something I never heard of before. But they were worshiping and then they fell over. And they called it slain in the spirit. And people were standing up and doing things with their hands when they were singing. Now, we didn't do that in the church I grew up in. You picked up your green book and you opened it and that's what you were doing when you were singing, holding this green book and reading the words. So all of this craziness was happening. And I thought I was in a cult. And I just wanted to go home. And I kept calling my mom and dad and saying, you need to come and get me. These people are whack. These people are crazy. This is a cult. And one of the women in the class I was a part of, she noticed me. And she said, Annette, are you doing okay? And I was like, I'm leaving. My mom and dad are leaving. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And she made me tea, lemon verbena tea, I remember, and which was helpful because it helped me relax because I was freaking out. And she said, can I talk to you about Jesus? And I said, yeah, whatever, I'm leaving. And she said, Annette, do you know Jesus? And I said to her, listen, I know all about Jesus. I'm leaving. And she said, no, Annette, I didn't ask you if you know about Jesus. I'm asking you if you know him, like in a personal way. And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know what that means. So she told me this story that's found in the book of John with this guy named Nicodemus, who was like a short guy. And he's talking to Jesus in John chapter 3. And Jesus is saying in that chapter, you must be born again to enter the kingdom of God. And Nicodemus in that chapter says, what are you talking about? Are you seriously saying that I have to this is what he says, I have to crawl back in my mom's womb and be born again? Like, that's whack. And Jesus says, no, it's not a physical birth. It's a spiritual birth. And this woman took the time to explain that story to me and asked me if I wanted to have a personal relationship with Jesus. And I said, okay. So she prayed with me, and literally, after she was done praying and I was done praying, I opened my eyes, and it was like I could see and understand things that I couldn't see or understand before. And there's no better way for me to explain than this Bible that I had drilled into my brain through first communion classes, through confirmation classes, through all the boring sermons that I thought I was going to die, through the hymns that I thought were so awful. All of those things came to life for me. And I began an actual relationship with Jesus. Before that happened, though, I was literally living out 1 Corinthians 14:23 with this group of people. If the whole church comes together and everyone speaks in tongues, but inquirers or unbelievers come in, will they not say that you are out of your mind? That's what I said. These people are out of their mind. And someone noticed that that's how I was feeling and took the time to talk to me and to listen to me and to explain what in the world was going on. And thank goodness they did. Thank goodness you did. Because, I've been a pastor for 27 years, and I can go all the way back to that little couple of loving women, and I'm going to taking the time to no longer assume that I knew what was going on.
I've never heard that story, so I don't hear that.
Yeah.
I'm really passionate about that too, and that was a question that I started asking myself kind of when I explored the church, because I didn't like church growing up. And I would like be in the, anybody remember the lower grade room over here? I'd be over there and I'd be doing DBS and they'd be giving out Kit Kats and balloons for memorized Bible verses. I'm like, what the heck are they doing? Like, what is going on? I didn't get it. I was like, what is, I'm learning about this stuff, but I wasn't learning about the person I was supposed to know, the God that I was supposed to know. And so, especially as I started to dive into my own faith, I was asking the question, do we understand how the church might look from the world's perspective? Because as much as we can open our Bible, and that's amazing, and we can learn a lot of things from that, and like it is the source of truth for us, we live in the world. Though we are not of the world, when we accept Jesus as our Savior and when we know Him, we live here. And it is our job to think about what that's going to look like to the world. And we'll get into a verse about that in a minute, but even Jesus says in John chapter 15, that because we are no longer of this world, we will not be accepted by it. So then, how in the world do we share about Jesus without people saying that we're out of our minds? Because Paul said it here. He's like the OG guy trying to bring the gospel to the world, and he was saying this was going to happen. Like, if that was happening then, imagine what 2,000 years of lies in the world has done and twisted to the minds of people here. And though churches are important and they need to exist, I started to wonder, what if there could be a place that accomplished the mission that Jesus gave to his disciples to love Him and to love people? What if there could be a place that was not a typical Christian group or church that accomplished that same goal? After all, there's many people who won't go to church due to past negative experiences in church or with faith. So do we understand how the church might look from the world's perspective? Because that's a part of being a disciple in the world. And those thoughts ended up being the core values of a ministry that I helped start in Mankato called Hustle. And it's a picture of all the dudes and gals that were hanging out on the last week. We started at 5 people, and we grew to 40 this year. And you guys see the guy in the lanyard on the left in the front? His name's Bryce. He was here yesterday. And he said, I would not be in a church every week on Sundays if it weren't for Hustle. And at Hustle, never sang any worship songs, didn't really give a formal sermon. We prayed for a dinner like one time. And we didn't have any special spaces or times, but we just had faith that if we kept those 2 greatest commands, to love God and to love people, that God will take care of providing opportunities for us to share our faith. And the Spirit will work in people in a way that we never could. And then that has blossomed and grown into a group that I helped to start here in Plymouth with Sam and Jack over here. And that's already got 40 people, and we're having a lot of deep conversations already, which is awesome. So this next verse is kind of the core verse of both of those groups, and it's probably one of my favorite ones in the Bible. It says, so then, men or people ought to regard us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Steward means you're caring for something, you're watching over it, you're thinking about it intentionally and thoughtfully. Now it is required of stewards they be found faithful. It is required of you, if you are entrusted with something, to actually care for it, to actually think about it from multiple perspectives. We are entrusted with the blessing of church work, because worship is a great word. Praise is a great word. But those are a mystery to the world. And that's what this verse is saying. And we must prove faithful to being entrusted with those words because of how they've transformed our lives and what Jesus has told us to do with the truths behind those words. if you don't know what CTR means, when I put that up on the slide before, I mean, I could do a raise of hands of anybody who does know, but I feel like that's meaningless. So I put that word up there as an example for what it feels like when you do not know what a word means and somebody starts talking about it. And I tried to do my best to explain it, but like, I'm sure there's some of you who are like, business is boring, I hate this. And that's like totally okay, I love it.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, oh, love it, love you. But, like, if you start using words that people don't understand as much as the truths might matter deep down to you, I'm just gonna go right over their head, and they're gonna just start zoning out. And you know, God can do it like way more than we could ever imagine or talk about. But Satan, though he cannot change the word of God in its truth, he can twist people's perceptions of what God's word is. He can twist people's perceptions of churches, especially because it takes people to run churches and we're all sinful. But we are being foolish if we don't believe that Satan is devising schemes to make Jesus and the words associated with the church sound crazy. And we're not stewarding the mysteries of God well if we aren't sensitive to that and thoughtful about that.
Okay, so we're gonna put up, Brandon and I brainstormed a list of all these church words that we can think of. And of all of these words that we've said, we've heard in the church, they're all in the Bible. You can find these words somewhere in the Bible except for one. One of these church words is not in the Bible. Can you guess which one it is?
Holy Spirit. Let's know what you got.
Bible study?
Yes! That word is not in the Bible. The word Bible is not in the Bible. Crazy, right? All of these other words, in some context or another, are in the Bible. But oftentimes, they aren't even used in the Bible the way we use them as Christians. So let's get to our the next three words. You guys are gonna try and guess.
Incense.
Yes. Incense. You know why we have that word as one of the church words? Austin asked us to put it in there. Because last Sunday, there was a worship song that was sung in high school, and the word incense was in the song. And Austin said to me, I don't know if anybody knows what the relevance of that word is to God. And I said, do you? And he said, no. So that's why we put it as one of the church words. Like a lot of times in those signs, you sing the signs, you don't even know what you're singing. You just sort of sing them. So what does the Bible have to say about incense? Well, it's used as a sacrifice and as light. Old Testament's full of people trying to take care of their sin on their own by killing stuff and shedding blood and offering incense or whatever. And then, thank goodness, Jesus came so we don't have to do that nonsense anymore. But that's one of the reasons incense is used as an offering. It's also used as some sort of electrical thing. My guess is the worship song that we sang, we were not singing about electrical lighting. We were probably supposed to be singing about offering, like giving of ourselves, because that's what the purpose of incense was. Well, let's say you have a friend. And quite honestly, I think most of the people that were in here last Sunday were listening to those words. Some of them were singing them and had no idea why they were doing them. So that's another church word, okay? By the way, incense is like I mean, what do you think most people think of when they hear the word incense? Stinks. I don't know. Burning stick. Right? Bed Bath and Beyond? I don't know what people are thinking. Weird word. Okay, what about this one?
Testimony.
Yes! Guessed earlier, but this is actually a testimony. Right? Okay, so when people in the church world are talking about, let's have you share your testimony, If you do not understand the church world, what in the world are you thinking they're talking about? Like you hold up your hand and get the Bible, okay, I promise to tell the truth, all the truth, and nothing but the truth. Because that's how testimony works in court. There is the word testimony in the Bible. It says God's testimony, like what God is saying. God has a testimony of his Father. That same Y-Band group, Youth of the Mission, even though I did give my life to Christ when I was there was still all kinds of stuff that they were doing that was a little crazy. One of them was, we went to Uptown. You've been to Uptown? Like I grew up in Uptown. But we went to Uptown as a group on a school bus. And the instructor said, okay, get off the bus and share your testimony with as many people as you can and get them saved. And I was like, what's a testimony? I mean, I had no idea what they're talking about. Thank goodness there was a really cute boy in my class who said, let's just go get fries. And so we just went to eat french fries. And then he said, Annette, when you get back on the bus, just say the number 5. And I said 5, and then apparently they cheered because they thought that 5 people got saved because I shared my testimony. And I didn't even know what my testimony was. I'm the HR director for all of our church networks. We used to have an employee like an application, you apply to a job. And the application here for church, one of the questions was, please share your testimony. And all I could think about was that stinking bus in Uptown. So I just erased the word testimony and wrote in faith story. Because that's what a testimony is, and the way that we use it as a church. A story about your faith with Jesus. So testimonies in the Bible, but it drives me nuts when Christians use that word. And then the last one, what do you think this one is? Rap.
Preach.
You think rap is in the Bible?
Rap might be in the Bible, but I don't know. Preach is not, but that would have been a good one. What? Sermon would have been a good one. That is in the Bible.
Jesus. Parable.
Parable? Good one. Not right. Like what's, I will sound like a dork if I say the word. I just said it actually.
What word?
Word.
Oh,
Like word.
This is not real photo, by the way, this is AI generated.
Yeah, there is no record.
Yes, and
It's
just
just
one.
rapping, but he could have.
yeah, because there's 5.
In Renaissance style.
It does have 6 finger ones.
If anybody would, it'd probably be Jesus, because he gave a lot of people a hand.
Okay, so words in the Bible, right? Like for sure, word is in the Bible, the Bible verse that we chose. We confess our sins, he's faithful and just will forgive our sins. Cleanse us from all unrighteousness, and when we've not sinned, we make him liar. His word is not in us. So in that context, his word is like the things that he said, but also Jesus is described as the word in the Bible. The Bible itself is never described as the Bible in the Bible. It is described as the word. But so is Jesus. I mean, talk about confusing to someone who doesn't have the church context. So good job with those words.
So we're just about to wrap up. I have a short story I'm going to share, and then we'll talk about, like, actually what does this look like in your lives. But when I was a senior in high school, I have a friend, and I'm going to call him John. It's not his actual name. And I invited him to come to church. And I had not talked to him for 3 years. But because I had recently accepted Jesus and got to know Jesus, I was trying to reconnect with old friends that I had to share this good news with them. And John said, sure, I'll come to church. And I was like, wow, I can't believe he actually accepted that invitation. I would not have accepted that invitation like 3 months earlier. And so he came to church, and it was the first week of January. And was anybody here in high school in the first week of January? You guys know what happens that day? That is the hearing from God, one word night. And so when I looked over at my friends in the auditorium, and John heard them say, we're going to spend an hour listening to God, he looked petrified. And I was like, I looked over and I leaned over and I said, you want to just go talk outside? And he looked over like this. And I could just feel that, like, what is this stuff happening in the church? I could feel it. And though like that night, I got a super cool word that night this year that I feel like was communicated to me from God. With John in that time, in that moment, I felt like the right thing to do based on what I've learned in the past, what I've learned in the Word of God, which is the Bible, was to choose to love that person in the way that I felt he needed to love that night. And so we went outside, and John and I had a great conversation by the fire upstairs, talked for an hour, and it got really deep. And at the end of the night, John said to me, you know, Brandon, if I was going to leave after I found out that was happening in the auditorium, but then I chose to stay because I wanted to catch up with you. Like I did my best to make the most of every opportunity, and God worked through that. And actually, I was hanging out with John the other night. He said to me, Brandon, you're the friend I come to with my God questions. I was like, how cool is that? Like, maybe it didn't look like how it was supposed to look like, or how church wanted it to look like for everyone else, even though that's good too for some people. What happened with John that night, it was just like it was meant to be, and we were able to establish that relationship. And I preserved the message of Christ through it, and provided future opportunities to talk about God with John. And just like with the group that I talked about, Hustle, and Mankato, it's not about us, saying certain things. It's not about us having this perfect structure, but it's about us choosing to do the two most important things that Jesus tells us to do, which are to love Him and to love people, and having faith that God can do the rest, as long as we're paying attention and being thoughtful along the way. And we're going to hit last some application points.
Yeah. So I love this first one. Is the focus on what you know or who you know? Jesus says the focus needs to be on who. The importance of always thinking about what do you think your friends know that maybe they don't. The fancy word for that is assumptions that we make as Christians. Be aware of the words you are using. One of my favorite expressions is God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We need to listen twice as much as we talk. And then God is more interested in people knowing Him than the special words used by people that know Him. There's lots of special words that we as Christians use, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what God really wants us to focus on is not what we know, but on who. So those are questions for us to take away. That is our teaching.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So what should I do if I do a sermon or a worship song, a church word, and I don't understand it? Yeah.
Well, for one thing, it's so important to know that it's okay if you don't understand something. Our church is a part of, Woodridge is a part of a church network called Aspen Grove. You've heard that language? Aspen Grove. I teach a membership class. And I would say 9 out of every 10 people that want to become a member of our church network have no idea what Aspen Grove means, but they think they're supposed to know, so they can ask. And that's the way a lot of people are at church. I think I'm supposed to know what that means, so I'm not going to ask. So I would say, anytime you don't know what something means, whoever is leading, just go and ask them. And be okay with that.
God might use that to show them, maybe we need to think about these words more, and think more about the words that are being used here.
Well, yeah, it just happened this morning. Like, whoever it was in this group that said, what does Pentecost mean? And Brandon was like, I don't know. So we did a little deep dive and figured it out. So yeah, if whoever is teaching it, if you find yourself as the person who's doing the teaching, whether like normal teaching or just like sitting with like, it's okay that you don't know. One of my favorite things to say is, you know what, that's an awesome question. And I'm committed to, so I'm gonna figure out what the answer is. I can't stand people who are Christians. Like think that they're supposed to know everything, so then they BS their way through an answer. And just like, I mean, I don't know, I guess. Sort of brainer or some kind of doubt. I'm just tell me you don't know, what's the deal? Great question. I have a question. Is there anyone in this room this morning that knows the names of the videos? Just curious. Anybody else have a question? You're itching your head. Sweet. Good.